Two of the best running backs in the NFL will square off this Sunday in the Superdome with Saquon Barkley of the Giants and Alvin Kamara of the Saints. Should be a fun one to watch how those two backs get it going. And of course, quarterback matchup, Derek Carr. Will his struggles continue? Will he get on the right track? And Tommy DeVito, is he a fluke? Is he for real? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvogen. As always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner, injury lawyers who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore. Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. Saints, Giants this Sunday. Kind of an interesting matchup, to say the least. Obviously, you're looking at two teams that I mentioned at the tease where you have two incredible running backs with Saquon and Alvin, and they're going to be a big part of their respective teams' game plans. There's no doubt about that. But the quarterbacks are interesting stories too, right? Obviously, with Derek Carr, this season has not played out the way he wanted it to and the way many of us hoped that it would. Obviously, I had high expectations for Derek Carr. There's a lot of people that did, and they have not panned out. As for Tommy DeVito, no one expected this guy to be the starting quarterback for the New York Giants. Yet here we are in December, both teams playing meaningful football, whether their fans like it or not. And he's been kind of on a roll, winning his last three starts, playing a little bit better. Are there a lot of flaws? Absolutely. But look, that Packers win on Monday night for the Giants, that was probably the most electric it's been for them this season. So before I get into kind of our topics for this show and break down what's important for this matchup, I want to start off by just addressing the magnitude of a game like this. Now, would a win over the Giants change my opinion of the Saints? No, I've been steadfast in my opinion. I think this is a very flawed team in a fundamentally broken division. So, no, a win over the Giants that are playing their third string quarterback, that doesn't really move the needle much for me. Does it make the Saints a game better? Obviously. Does it give the Saints a little bit more confidence going into that Thursday night against the Rams in a week from today? Sure, it would add a little bit more intrigue to that. That might feel like a playoff game. So, yeah, of course, obviously, a win makes the arrow point up. But for me, in terms of the direction of the franchise, I wouldn't say it does. As for a loss, I'm going to be fair. I actually don't think a loss to the Giants would change my perspective of the franchise. A loss to the Panthers, maybe so. A loss to the Giants, no. I think the Saints and the Giants are pretty similar teams. They're mid at best so far this season. They've dealt with quarterback issues. They haven't played their best football, or at least what fans expected. And they've been quite disappointing at times. So, no, a win wouldn't change my perspective, nor would a loss. But I got to be fair. A win would help the Saints, obviously, in their pursuit of a playoff berth. And a loss, I'm not saying it would put them out of the playoff race, because this division's so bad. And I do think that it probably will come down to week 18. But I do think that a loss to the Giants really does put you in a tough spot, because I think the Falcons will beat the Panthers this Sunday and get to 7 wins. So if you're a game behind the Falcons, plus you already got to worry about the fact that you've lost your first game to Atlanta this season, maybe that puts you in a tough spot. But anyway, let's get into the Giants-Saints game, talk about what's going to be important, keys to this game. Obviously, we got to start off with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, in terms of numbers, is he ever going to do what he did rookie year? Probably not, right? 2,000 yards from scrimmage. He was sensational. The Giants had a really good game plan for him. That offense had enough weapons like Odell Beckham Jr. in his prime, where there wasn't all that pressure on Saquon, more opportunities to really feast. And while that may not be the case anymore for him to be a 2,000 yards from scrimmage running back, and Lord, that's so freaking hard to kind of say it as if it's easy, but it's not, obviously. He's playing a lot better. And over the last couple of games, and in fact, if you go as far to October 29th, he's had at least 66 rushing yards in each game, and some of them have been big ones, right? 90 yards against the Raiders, 83 against the Packers, 120 plus against the Jets, 90 against the Commanders. So he's played well. He's played really well. And I think for Saquon, you obviously, a guy like that, there's going to be a couple of losses of yards for certain plays. Certain plays you're going to get stuffed at the line of scrimmage, but you fear the big run. You fear that ability to just take the ball and go for 55 yards, go for 40 yards, and just break the game open at any moment, because he has that game-changing potential. And obviously that's going to be a key for the Saints, and whether or not they can stop him. Truth of the matter, I think the answer is no in terms of stopping him from eventually breaking off one of those big runs. I just feel like that's an inevitable thing against a really bad run defense right now. The, hope for the Saints is the Giants O-line isn't very good. I think you're going to go into this game and look at the Giants O-line and look at the Saints O-line, and you're going to go, okay, regardless of who's playing quarterback for either team next year, you better get better in the trenches. Because if you don't, you're still going to have the same problem at quarterback, right? Whether it's the lack of protection, the lack of moving people in the run game, that's a constant problem for both teams. So I definitely see that, obviously. But when it comes to Saquon, when you look at the matchup he has going for him, man, I'm a little concerned about it. You look over the last 3 weeks for the Saints run defense, it's been a big problem. 140 plus yards minimum given up in each of the last 3 games, with 2 out of those 3 games, 200 plus rushing yards given up. Over 200 to the Panthers, Falcons at over 220. That's not ideal. When you get moved around like that, that's a problem. And the bigger problem for the Saints would be these teams that are getting yardage on them in the ground game, they can't throw. So when they can't throw and the emphasis is put on the run game and you still can't stop them, that tells me there is something fundamentally broken with this run defense, whether it's a lack of talent, whether it's a lack of scheme, something is missing. Now, I think it's more talent than it is scheme because I got to be fair. I'm not a big Dennis Allen fan, but Dennis Allen's defense years ago when they had the right guys, that run defense was just amazing. They made you a one-dimensional offense. They said, you're not running on us. You could try throwing on us. And that might not work either. But you could try that. But don't try running. It's not going anywhere. The Saints aren't that anymore. This is a bottom 6 run defense in yards given up. This is a bottom 5 run defense in yards per carry given up this season in 4.6. So obviously that's a concern. And I don't know if you're able to contain Saquon. And I'm not saying Saquon's going to go for 100 plus rushing yards. Because like I said, he's only done that once since October 29th. And that was against the Jets. And that was on 30 plus carries. But is he going to have 1, maybe 2 just game-breaking runs? That is something that could be a concern. And I'm fascinated to see how that happens. But this is going to be a paramount matchup for the Saints. There's no doubt about it, because if you can't slow down Saquon, then that's a little bit of pressure taken off Tommy DeVito's shoulders, and you want all the pressure on Tommy DeVito. You want to be in a situation where he's asked to do everything. And you know what? If the guy steps up, if he delivers an incredible performance, kudos to him, you tip his cap. But you want to put the pressure on the undrafted rookie and say, hey, what do you got? And see how you go from there. But I want to be fair. I'm talking about Saquon and talking about him having a good matchup. I think this works for the Saints run game too. And I think this is going to be a big factor in this game. I think this is going to be a battle in the trenches in terms of running the football. Obviously, I mentioned both offensive lines aren't great, but both run defenses aren't great either. The Giants are also bottom 5 in yards given up per game on the ground. And Alvin, Jamal, Taysom, that trio right there, I think that's kind of your ticket to success. And I would argue, and I said this earlier, I believe on Monday, I think the Saints ran the ball really well against the Panthers. Kamara had 12 carries for 56 yards. Jamal had 11 carries for 43 yards. Like, you were seeing that 1-2 punch that we thought we would get back in April when the Saints made these signings and gave you some semblance of a run game. And we haven't seen it. And I don't think it's that they can't do it. I just think they're not sticking to it. I think the Saints got so pass happy against the Panthers for no reason, where if they just ran the football, played a boring style, it would work. And I think this could be the week you do it. And now that Taysom is getting healthier and it seems like he will play, you have those 3 guys at your disposal. Run the football. Because I could see this being a high turnover game. If the Saints and Giants want to go with heavy passing attacks, I could see this being a high turnover game. So just like I said, the Saints are going to have trouble limiting Saquon, especially from those big runs. I think this goes the same way for the Saints. I think Alvin Kamara could have a big game, but utilize him correctly. And before I get into the next thing, that just gets me to this that's been on my mind. The more I watch the Saints this year, the more I think like they're just wasting Alvin Kamara more than any other team is wasting a certain player, because I think he still is elite. I think the traits are there. And they basically give him the ball in these vanilla plays and either have a dump off where there's 2 guys in front of him or run it up the gut and say, be special. And more times than not, he still makes that special play. But can you make life a little bit easier for him? Can you get him out in space? Can you dial up something that's going to be great for your running back? That's all I ask, because I think Alvin's still a special talent. So we mentioned Saquon, and I said you got to try and limit him, because the more you limit him, the more pressure there is on young Tommy DeVito. Well, let's talk about Tommy DeVito. So in terms of scheduling break, this is going to be the 5th rookie starting quarterback the Saints face this year. That is tied for the most games against rookie quarterbacks since the NFL merger. And oddly enough, and not really oddly enough, actually, because the schedules obviously are similar for division rivals, the Falcons are tied with the Saints for 5 games against rookie starting quarterbacks. scheduling break's been so easy for these NFC South teams. They have not taken advantage. I don't think you could look at Tommy DeVito, kind of laugh at the whole Tommy Cutlets thing and say, all right, they'll be fine. Do I think he's special? No, I think this is more of a Jeremy Lin type of, run where New Yorkers are having their fun with it. I don't blame them. It's been a miserable season. You have this glimmer of hope and you're in the playoff hunt. Have your fun. I say do it. But I don't look at Tommy DeVito and think there's anything there from a special traits in terms of passing. But look, he is the reigning NFC Offensive Player of the Week. He did have a really nice game-winning drive for the Giants with about a minute left to get them in field goal range, and he took what the defense gave him. It hasn't had turnovers the last 3 games. That's been big for him. And the main concern, I think this is something where I don't think this aspect of him is a fluke. Now, I think this 3-0 record over the last 3 games and him not turning over the football, I think that's more of a fluke than it is for real. But again, time will tell, and he could prove everyone wrong on Sunday with another good start. The legs, the ability to make plays on the ground, that is what scares me about DeVito. And I'm not saying it's going to leave me shaking in my boots and I'm so concerned about it, but if there was one thing the Saints don't do well against quarterbacks, it's stopping the run. Didn't do it against Josh Dobbs. Desmond Ridder had some success. Tyson Bagent had 70 yards rushing. Bryce Young didn't really want to run last week, but Lord, he had a lot of success when he did. I look at Bagent, when he had 70 yards against the Saints, I thought, how the hell does this happen? And then I see DeVito go for 70 yards against the Packers, and my mind immediately goes, all right, might just pencil him in for 70 yards this weekend as well. And now the 70 yards rushing isn't the norm for DeVito. He was nowhere close to that number this season in his starts, but you could see the athleticism there. 71 on 10 carries. He's done this in college too in terms of being able to use his legs, and they've kind of made it where the system is you kind of have that high read, low, medium read, low read. If it's not there, take off. And Brian Daboll's kind of established this offense for him where you can look around, first read, second read, go. If you don't got it, just take out. I think that's something that could affect the Saints. And I think the way you might combat that, and we'll see how they do it, is getting pressure on him. I think this is going to have to be the big DeMario Davis game. And I think he could step up, and I think he can do it, but it has to be him. Because if not, and DeVito's making plays with his legs, and you give this young quarterback confidence in a Superdome that I don't expect to be that loud. I'm sure if the game's exciting, maybe the crowd that is there will get into it, but it seems like the fans are kind of out on this season. That's just the way it feels. Last weekend felt like a preseason game. I don't know if this next game feels that much better. Is it a preseason game? Maybe not. Does it feel like a playoff game? It won't feel like that atmosphere-wise. So he may not have to deal with the Superdome at its height and powers, but you want to get pressure on him. You want to make him feel uncomfortable. And I think that's a big part of it. Having that QB spy, making sure you're not letting him get these easy runs that just extend the drives and put pressure on you. Because I think from a secondary aspect, the Saints should be fine. And that is without Lattimore, and that is without Marcus May. But you got to look at the Giants pass catchers. Who is going to dictate this game? Is it Wan'Dale Robinson? I don't see it. Is it Jalen Hyatt? I don't see it yet. Is it Darius Slayton? Probably not. Like, those are nice pieces. I don't think any of those guys are scrubs by any means, but I don't think those guys are game-changing players, at least not yet. And I think that bodes well for the Saints in terms of not having to worry about your pass defense just being susceptible to so many big plays. So, again, is Tommy DeVito a fluke? Is he for real? I think we're going to get those answers as time goes on. And I don't even think Sunday's game gives you the answer for certain, But I think that the rushing aspect of him is for real. And I think given the circumstances for the Saints, you want to kind of cut that out and make sure you could take out his legs, not physically, just statistically from this game. And before I move on, I just want to add one more point. For anyone that thinks DeVito's not a good quarterback, and I very much probably agree with you, Josh Dobbs, who has been demoted to quarterback 3 for the Vikings, lit up the Saints. So I don't think the Saints defense gets any leeway here in terms of matchups and who they should succeed against, because they haven't done their job necessarily well. Now, that probably bodes terribly for a guy like Bryce Young, right? He did not play well against the Saints, and every quarterback over the last month has. That's not good for him, obviously. But I don't know if the defense kind of gets that benefit of the doubt when I've seen them play poorly against like a Tyson Bagent or against a Josh Dobbs. They got to come out and earn it, and hopefully they do. But I think it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out for sure. So, we talked about DeVito. We got to talk about the other quarterback, Derek Carr. What an interesting year. What an interesting year for Derek Carr. From a numbers perspective, through 13 games, he's completing 66.4% of his passes for a little over 2,800 or a little under 2,900, yards, 2,880 yards to be exact. He's got 13 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He's been sacked 25 times. Crazy enough, if we take his 13-game sample size as opposed to Andy Dalton's 14-game sample size, Carr wins in yardage, but he has a slightly worse completion percentage by 0.3. He's got 5 less touchdowns, 2 less interceptions, and they've been sacked the same amount of times, 25. And the reason I bring up those numbers, and I know that Derek Carr's been hurt. I understand that he's missed time. The big, controversy to this contract was, are you just paying a lot for what you could get with Andy Dalton? And I thought that was blasphemy. I thought Carr was a clear upgrade over Dalton, and he hasn't been. It's literally been kind of the same quarterback, but for so much more money. Dalton last year was 1 year, $3 million. Carr, obviously, 4 year, $150 million. That's a huge difference. When one guy's getting close to $40 million, the other guy's getting $3 million, that's a huge gap. And there's no justifying that upgrade in salary with that just kind of stalemate in terms of production. And look, I know Carr's been hurt. I know that he's not the only guilty hand for this season. But going into this Giants game, we could simply say it. This contract has been a disaster, and the production has been awful relative to the pay. And when I look at Carr, I don't think it's one of those, is he going to turn it around against the Giants? I think if there was going to be a moment where he just turns around, it would have happened already, And when I look at this matchup, I don't think this is a great matchup for him because I think this is a Giants defense under Wink Martindale who's going to want to blitz. That it's in his MO to blitz the hell out of opposing quarterbacks. And the reason I say this isn't a great matchup is what's another team and who's another defensive coordinator who loves to blitz? Brian Flores. Vikings are number 1 blitz rate this year. They send more 6-man rushes than any other team this season. When the Vikings played the Saints couldn't move the football. Now, from a numbers perspective, yeah, Carr was 13 of 18. The completion percentage was fine, and he had 110 yards before he got hurt. But they didn't score. They couldn't get the ball into the red zone. They weren't moving things. And I think this whole 13 of 18 thing, sometimes what does it mean at this point? You can be completing passes if they're not meaningful yards, if they're not meaningful throws down the field, it could just feel kind of empty. So last time we've seen Carr against a heavy blitz defense in the Vikings, he didn't have a lot of success, and the offense didn't get going until Jameis came in and the Vikings played prevent defense. So I think that this is going to be fascinating to see if A, the line can block for Carr, something that they're going to need to do, and B, if the Saints can get Derek Carr to operate in an offense that values quick timing throws. Early in the year, I thought it was on Pete Carmichael. And look, there's a lot of blame to go to Pete Carmichael. His offense doesn't use play action enough. It doesn't use motion enough. It feels like an offense that is stuck in like the 90s rather than playing in the 2020s. So he deserves blame. But the more the season goes on, the more I watch the games and rewatch them and go, I don't think Derek Carr likes to actually throw those intermediate passes. Doesn't like to hit those deep curls. Doesn't like to hit slant routes. He just wants to push it deep. And if it's not there, he's just going to dump it down to the running back. And that isn't winning football. That isn't sustainable football in today's NFL. And I think for the Giants, they might blitz heavily with Wink Martindale. They have an elite defensive tackle in Dexter Lawrence with an emerging star on the outside in Kayvon Thibodeau, who's playing really well with 11.5 sacks. And look, is their secondary loaded? No. But if they get pressure on Derek, they might throw him into and pressure him into bad throws. And if you do that, you're going to play right into the Giants' hands. So I would love to see the Saints have a methodical offense, quick passes, quick hitters. And that's on Derek. Derek's got to be willing to do that. And so far, he hasn't been. And to make matters worse, he might not have Chris Olave for this game. And just how important is Chris Olave to this game? His status might very well dictate whether or not they win or lose this game. That's how important he is. He is that security blanket. He is that wide receiver 1. And no, the Saints should not jeopardize his long-term health. If he's not healthy, you don't play him. You obviously sit him. But his status is huge. And as bad as Carr's been at times this year, Carr and Olave for the last 3 games, it's been working. It's been clicking at a very high rate. So to take him out of the equation, if that happens, with an offense, with a defense that wants to blitz, and you take away that player's security blanket, quick hitters, screen game, got to figure it out. And obviously run the football, something that I mentioned before, but it does concern me. This is a concerning matchup for me. I don't like Derek Carr against a heavy blitz defense with him having the rib injury, the shoulder injury, and just not being a quarterback that likes to run an offense where it's a 10-yard curl there, a 7-yard slant here. Like, it can't just be dump offs to the running back. It can't just be throwing it deep to A.T. Perry or Rashid Shaheed, who is going to come back, thankfully. So again, I don't love the matchup, but we'll see how this breaks down. So I'll give my prediction to this game in just a minute and then pull up any comments that you guys have before we wrapped up this edition. Before I do that, though, I just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook.
In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, you know DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code BOOT. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code BOOT. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Bonus bets expired 168 hours after issuance. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/basketball terms.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. So before I get into any comments you guys have in the chat, and I will get to that in just a moment, like I said, prediction time. I think this is very clearly one of those 20-17 type of games. I don't think these are high explosive offenses. You know, I think there'll be some fun moments, right? With Saquon, with Alvin, with Taysom, even a rookie wide receiver in Jalen Hyatt. There could be fun moments in this game, but I think you look at these defenses, I still think there's a little juice there for both sides. You know, Giants obviously are getting a lot of production now out of guys like Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau and Bobby Okereke. They're a high-prized linebacker. For the Saints, I want to see if they kind of replicate what they did last week. They blitzed the hell out of Bryce Young. Are they going to blitz the hell out of Tommy DeVito? I think that's going to be fascinating to see. Now, I think the Saints should win. Does not mean they will win because, again, I think these teams are kind of, I don't want to say evenly matched, but the Giants aren't far off from the Saints, and the Saints aren't far off from the Giants, obviously. I'm going to say the Saints win this game 20-17, but I very well could be wrong. Now, I picked them to beat the Panthers last week, but that felt easy because the Panthers are just an absolute train wreck. I think this one's going to be closer. A win or loss doesn't change my perspective of the Saints, but I'm going to go Saints in this one. I just, a young Giants team coming off an emotional win against the Packers. Do they maybe run out of steam there? And look, I'm going to say this for DA. If you can't figure out ways to trick Tommy DeVito at home, forget it, man. Like, he already, in my mind, should pack it up, even though the Saints might very well keep him. But if you can't find ways to trick Tommy DeVito, then I don't know, man. Because when I see him throw, there's not a lot there from the passing game. It's a lot predicated on run game and obviously getting off the spot and just those easy, quick reads. If you can't mix it up on him, you got problems. So I will take the Saints to win. Do I feel great about it? No. The Chris Olave injury really, really, really scares me. But again, we'll see. These games got to be played and 4 weeks left. So we just got to troop through it. So let's get any comments you guys have here in the chat. I'm assuming it won't be too much today, but let's get into them. We got a super chat here from Hootie Juby. First off, thank you so much for giving the support to this channel. Man, I really appreciate it. If you guys haven't checked out his content, please go do so. He does some amazing stuff here on YouTube. He says, I said this on my show, I still think Carr is a good quarterback, just not comfortable in this offense yet, facing injuries, and big reason league is now for mobile quarterbacks, not pocket passing league anymore. So, look, I don't know if he's still a good quarterback. I find it hard to believe he's as bad as he's been this year. Like, I just find it tough to say the quarterback who 2 years ago took the Raiders to the playoffs, despite losing their head coach, despite losing Henry Ruggs. Like, I find it hard to believe that guy's just gone. I'd imagine better coaching could get more out of him. No doubt about that. I just think between this system and the lack of accountability from Derek Carr, that's where it gets frustrating. As for the mobile quarterback thing, I absolutely agree with you. Like, look at any quarterback right now who's having success, even if they're not by definition a running quarterback or a dual threat quarterback, they have mobility. They have escapability to them. I look at two MVP guys in Dak and Brock Purdy, obviously, and two MVP candidates. Dak obviously could get off his spot if he needs to and make plays with his legs. Brock has a little bit of that kind of Tony Romo flair to him where he can kind of spin off the tackler and make a throw downfield or kind of run out to his left and make a throw downfield. You need that. With Derek, you're not getting it. And it's weird because I actually think Derek is an above-average athlete. I just don't think he uses it. But I do agree with you. I think this is a league that is trending towards being able to have athleticism in your game. And if you don't have it, it's tough to get, tough to have success in this league. Got another super chat from Moody Juby. Thank you so much, man. He says, seems like ever since he got hurt in the Packers game, he doesn't want to throw deep no more, just check downs and really short passes. A lot of check downs. He's still throwing it deep. Obviously, the success rate hasn't been there, and the footwork's been a big problem. His footwork was great in the Colts game. Unsurprisingly, he had his best throws down the field in that one. So I love to see his footwork get better. We'll see if he does that. But a lot of unnecessary hitches when he's taking those shots down the field. Maybe that's him uncomfortable. It's really tough to tell what's kind of going through his head. But I do agree. I think the quarterback we saw week 1 and week 2 has been different since post-Packers injury. And it stinks because I thought the Packers game was kind of like how well he was playing through the first 3 games. And then it just fell off a cliff. But I'm shocked at how bad it's been. I really thought at the very least he'd give them a solid game manager. Got a comment here from Lord Lude83 says, Saquon torched us last time we played them. Yeah, he did. And Daniel Jones torched them. Daniel Jones was the offensive player of the week in the NFC after the Giants beat the Saints. So we shall see. It is going to be mighty interesting to see how the Saints handle Saquon because he is an explosive playmaker. It might not be a consistency thing, but the game-breaking part is there. Eric says the Giants will blitz the hell out of the Saints O-line. Derek Carr doesn't handle the blitz well, and our guards are awful blocking against it. Yeah, look, Wink Martindale wants to be a heavy pressure defensive coordinator. He wants to dial up the blitz. There's no doubt about it that it's going to happen. He will blitz heavily. How do the Saints respond? No cap, no filter. Saints says, at home versus Giants, I want to see banners, signs, shirts. Write it on your phones if near the broadcast. #fire Dennis Allen. Yeah, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I know there were shirts in the Dome given out to a certain section that did say fire Dennis Allen. I actually did have a fire Dennis Allen shirt sent to me. I will wear it at some point. Maybe if the Saints lose Sunday, I'll break it out. But I think that there's still obviously unsatisfied fans. And I think the more those kind of unsatisfied fans become the majority, that pushes the Saints closer to going, we got to make a move. Because if it's not going to be a move based off merit, it might be a move based off financials. And that could get them there. Now we'll see. I don't expect the Dome to be packed. I do expect a lot of complaints during this game when there is frustration. But I can't say for certain he will be fired. And I don't want to promise anything because there's still 4 games left. And I think the Saints are going to look for reasons to keep him rather than find reasons to have a culture shift. Mello says, are we being too hard on Carr knowing it's his first year with us? Look, I'm going to say no because given the money, given his longevity in the league, he should be better. You expect better from him. So for him to play the way he's played, no, I think that fans have been fine. They've been fair with it. I think you never want to make it personal, though. I do think there are personal attacks that happen on social media and people that cross the line too much. And this isn't just a Derek Carr thing. I think this is for players around the league, right? You got to find that balance between being critical and not just being an absolute terrible human being. But in terms of just how are people judging how he's playing on the field? No, I don't think they're being overcritical. When you sign him for $40 million and you have weapons around him, you got to make it work. And I always look at quarterbacks who come in like Joe Burrow to Cincy and CJ Stroud to Houston. Those are rookies. Those are guys when Burrow came to, his second year is already winning with Cincy. He takes him to the Super Bowl. CJ Stroud, first year with the Texans. And those are considered dysfunctional organizations and have immediate success. You expect them to elevate their teams. So that's why I think it's fair to be critical when a veteran's not elevating his team, especially when they paid thinking he'd be a massive upgrade over Andy Dalton. And unfortunately, he has not been doing that. Lord Lude 83 says, Pete Carmichael's running a preseason style offense, vanilla as hell. Which is funny because the preseason opening drive he had with Derek Carr, the best drive the Saints have had all year, methodically going down the field, spreading the ball around. I thought that's what we were going to get, and we didn't. And man, wasn't that just a tease. Caleb says, Saints are running a running football team. Everyone knows this except the Saints. I agree with you. Obviously we know the success they have when Taysom Hill runs the football, but we also know last week Jamal Williams and Alvin Kamara ran well, and they went away for no reason. None whatsoever. I don't get it. I won't for the life of me get it. Maybe that's Derek Carr checking out of certain plays, possibly. But if you're running the football with success, just keep running it. Don't see any reason to change it. And yet they did. Desmond says, go Giants. I'm a Pels fan, but a diehard Giants fan. Interesting. We shall see how this goes. I'm sure there's going to be some Saints fans kind of hoping the Giants win. Obviously, I want a good game. I'd like to see the Saints show some type of semblance of a winning football team, but we shall see. And I said it after Sunday's game, and I'll say it again. If they play the way they played against the Panthers, they do that again this Sunday, they will lose. But hopefully they play better. It's hard to imagine they can play as bad or worse than what they did last Sunday. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. As always, guys, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, leaving your thoughts and comments. What do you guys think for this game? Let me know in the comment section below on YouTube. Do you think the Saints will move to 7-7? Do you think they're going to fall back here and drop to 6-8? Obviously, this is going to be a big game in terms of where they're standing in the playoff picture for both teams. Giants have kind of, thrusted their way back into the hunt. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, when this game does conclude on Sunday afternoon, I'll be here to recap it on the Straight Up Saints podcast for Bucher Media. So make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more content on here, the destination for the Who Dat Nation. I'll catch up with you guys on Sunday after the Giants-Saints game.